When one speaks of the Underrail, one cannot help but speak of Biocorp. Its story is the story of the world below, of mankind's fall from the poisoned sky, its retreat into the cave, and the hubris that nearly doomed it. But Biocorp's tale is not one of a single rise and fall. It is a cycle of ambition, ascent, collapse, and resurrection, each leaving scars upon the underrail that still shape it today. And at the heart of this cycle lies a secret, the Hollow Earth incident. Before we jump into the Hollow Earth incident and how Biocorp fell, we need to talk about this T6 group, the titan of the old world. Long before the collapse, before the surface cracked and burned, the world was ruled not by nations but by corporations. The old political entities, those things called states, clung to flags and laws, but their power was hollow. What truly guided humanity were the super corporations. To protect their interest, to stand united against government that no longer ruled, six of the greatest came together. They called themselves the T6. Each was vast, a civilization unto itself. Each pursued its own vision of human future. Biocorp, master of genetics and psionics, they twisted flesh, awakened minds, and reshaped humanity into something new. New Frontier Technologies, NFT for short, dreamers of strange homes, terraforming parent soil, cultivating food in impossible places. Nucleus Corporation, keepers of the atom, engineers of fission and fusion, gazing into the heavens with eyes of physics and fire. The Security Agency, forges of armies, thrones, warbots, and the iron backbone of military power. The Bionic Institute, architects of post-human, binding man to machine, weaving consciousness into silicon. Transcendics, philosophers of the unseen, theologians of the psyche, seekers of the soul's hidden mechanics.
But the people are retarded.
Together, these six form an axis of power that overshadowed the dying nations. They did not merely compete with states, they rendered them obsolete. And among them, Biocorp stood apart, for it was Biocorp's tree and Biocorp's sin that would define the centuries to come. The collapse of the surface was not a single cataclysm, but a chorus of disasters. The sky choked with ash, oceans poisoned, resources bled dry, the earth's surface became a grave, and so mankind descended. It was Biocorp who offered salvation. They had already carved the first tunnels, raised the first station. They called this great network of rails and caverns the Underrail. Humanity flocked to its promise of safety, and Biocorp welcomed them, not as equals, but as dependents. Colonies like Southgate Station, Foundry, and Core Cities were born of Biocorp's designs. For a time, Biocorp was sovereign. It was law, it was bread, it was a shield. To live underground was to live under Biocorp itself. But survival was not enough. Biocorp's gaze turned deeper. The Hollow Earth project. Beneath the known caverns lays a greater unknown, a realm of endless rocks and mystery, where echoes stretched beyond light. Biocorp launched its Hollow Earth project with great zeal. Drills bored downward, station pressed into the dark, laboratories sparked with ambition, and then silence. The records grow thin here. Whole colonies vanish from history. Notes are burned, servers are wiped. All that remains are fragments of speculation. Some say Biocorp unearthed a psionic field, ancient and endless, they awoke something that should have been left to sleep. Other whispers that the faceless were born here. Biocorp's experiments in flesh and minds, or perhaps a weapon, a mass of engineered life that broke free and spread unchecked. Whatever the truth, it was cataclysm. Colonies cut ties, infrastructure collapsed, unknown creatures began to wander the tunnels. This movement became known as the Hollow Earth Incident, and with it, the first Biocorp fell. From the ashes of this catastrophe, one horror endued, Tchort. To the faithful of the Institute, Tchort is a god. To scholars, it is a psionic biomass, an experiment grown into something alive. The origins of Tchort are obscure, but its shape revealed the hands of Biocorp, a living organism grown vast, fused with thought itself. It exerts will upon the minds of men to worship. Some believe Tchort was not the Hollow Earth itself, but Biocorp's attempt to recreate it, to forge in flesh a mirror of the intelligence they discovered below. Others claim it was the incident, the very thing that broke Biocorp's back. Yet, despite all, Tchort endured. Where colonies died, it lived. Where Biocorp fell, it remained. And so, its cult grew, a grotesque continuation of Biocorp's legacy. Not of order and salvation, but a mistake that could not be undone. Still, Tchort is not the final truth of the Hollow Earth. It is an echo, a shard, a distorted reflection of something older, greater, and deeper still. More than a century after the incident, Biocorp was reborn. Scientists and engineers pieced together the fragments of the old empire. They raised cities of power. DIS, Jewel of the North, a metropolis in a cavern, vast as the sky. Its university, the beating heart of knowledge. Hexagon, a tower city of metal and neon. Haven of hackers where the digital bled into the real. For a time, it seemed Biocorp might rise again, but in the north, a new power was gathering. Melek rose from the gangs, shaping them into an army. The Protectorate was born. 15 years ago, they stormed DIS, shattered Biocorp's High Council, and executed its leaders. And in Core City, revolt followed. Core City was Biocorp's southern jewel, a trading hub, a fortress, and a cultural heart. Its towers rose high above the cavern floor, each bearing the mark of Biocorp's engineering. But Core City was also a cauldron of resentment. Beneath the towers sprawled the slums, alleys of the dispossessed, where gangs ruled and the poor choked on scraps. Above the executive towers gleamed with luxury, and the last loyalists of Biocorp clung to their privileges. When the Protectorate toppled DIS, shockwaves reached Core City. Fear spread, or loyalist waivers. The street whispered of change. The riot began, as such things often do, with a spark. A protest over rations turned violent. A shipment bound for Biocorp's loyalists was intercepted by starving workers. Soldiers fired into the crowd, and then the city erupted. For weeks, Core City burned. The gangs of the lower district rose first. Armed with scavenged rifles, they flooded the plaza, stormed checkpoints, set fire to Biocorp's banners. The middle district fractured. Some fought for Biocorp, others joined the mobs, and many simply looted as the order crumbled. The upper towers became fortresses. Loyalist executives barricaded themselves, guarded by private security and Biocorp's trained psionics. but their power was brittle. Street by street, floor by floor, the riots tore the city apart. What began as hunger became vengeance, and what began as vengeance became revolution. In the end, Biocorp's loyalists were overwhelmed, not by the Protectorate, but by their own city. Executives were dragged into the streets, towers fell to fire, and from ashes rose a new power. The true strongest gangs emerged as true factions. Coretech, merchants and smugglers who seized the warehouses and supply chains. They began the city's lifeline, controlling its economy with iron grip. Praetorian Security, mercenaries who united the scattered enforcer and armed gangs. They become core city's shield and sword, shaping law through violence. Together they carved core city from Biocorp's courts, and though the Protectorate claimed victory in the north, it was these factions, Coretech and Praetorian, who ensured Biocorp would never return in the south. It was in this crucible of the endless conflict that the arena was born. At first, it was nothing more than a desperate solution, rival factions settling disputes with a single combat rather than an open war, an attempt to preserve what little infrastructure remained. But what began as necessity soon transformed into spectacle. Ordinary citizens, exhausted by years of bloodshed, flocked to see fighter clash, to witness their champions embody the violence of the city in controlled doses. Out of misery grew entertainment, out of chaos grew tradition. The arena was more than a sport, it became a mirror of core city's soul. Every duel fought within its wall was a ritual, a reminder that in this city, survival was earned through strength, skill, and cunning. Gunnar Edstrom, a shrewd entrepreneur and opportunist, while others saw the arena as a crude blood sport, Gunnar saw potential, a way to channel the city's violence into profit and stability. Edstrom struck deals with both Knight and Simmons, negotiating a fragile truce. Instead of destroying each other in endless battles, Praetorian Security and Coretech could showcase their might in the arena, each proving superiority. He turned the duels into grand events, funded by corporate sponsors and attended by thousands. Fighters became celebrities, household names that inspired loyalty and fanaticism. Bets were placed, fortunes were won and lost, and for the first time in years, Coretech had something resembling unity, if only in its obsession with blood and glory. The arena reshaped Core City into multitude of ways. Instead of constant open warfare, factions began using the arena to assert dominance. Victories in the ring were more than symbolics. They influenced trade, negotiations, and public morale. For many citizens, the arena became replacement for faith. Fighters were worshipped like demigods. Their victories seen as proof of faith or divine favor. The roar of the crowd replaced the chants of prayer. An entire industry sprang up around the arena. Betting syndicates, weapon crafting, even underground markets for performance-enhancing drugs and cybernetics. Violence wasn't just culture, it was economy. Ironically, the arena became the one thing everyone in Core City could agree on. Gangs, factions, and ordinary citizens all shred in its blood-soaked theater. It transformed endless civil wars into ritualized conflicts, creating a fragile stability where none should have been possible. In the end, the arena was Core City's salvation, but also its curse. It gave the city order, but at the cost of normalcy. It made peace possible, but only by enshrining violence as the city's highest value. General Malek is remembered as the iron hand of the Protectorate, a soldier who believed only in order, discipline, and the absolute rule of the Protectorate. When Biocorp relied on science and ambition, Malek relied on steel and obedience. His conquest of DIS broke Biocorp's northern defense and proving that their empire was indeed not invincible. To the citizen of Core City, Malek was a looming threat, a man who would grind them beneath his boots if they did not decide their own fate first. Inside the city, loyalties fractured. Louis Thorpe, the highest-ranking Biocorp director, still clinging to power, urged resistance against the Protectorate, but others saw only ruin in such defiance. Archibald Knight, second in command of Core City Security, staged a coup backed by soldiers loyal to him. Knight seized power and spilled from Biocorp, rebranding his forces as Praetorian Security. At his side was Rupert Simon, a brilliant technocrat who marshaled Core City's research sector. Together, Simmons and Knight led a revolt against the decaying remnants of Biocorp. Streets turned into war zone, loyalties and rebel forces clashed in a brutal civil conflict. Even civilians, scientists, workers, ordinary citizens were swept into the bloodshed. Knight was not a visionary, he was a pragmatist, a soldier who saw the Biocorp was finished and understood that clinging to it would mean death for the core city. His decision to split from Biocorp was not noble, it was survival. Yet his defiance reshaped the entire city, transforming its security forces into Praetorian Security, a faction that survived to this day. Knight represents the ruthless realism of the Underrail. Loyalty to an idea is meaningless if it cannot keep you alive. Where Knight was a man of action, Rupert Simon was a man of intellect. He represented the ambitious scientific class of the core city, technocrats, who resented Biocorp's decaying leadership but still hungered for technological progress and wealth. Simmons rallied the city's research sector to his cause, forming what would become Coretech. He is remembered as brilliant but cold, a man who saw people as resources to be managed. To Simmons, the collapse of Biocorp was not tragedy, it was opportunity. The revolt succeeded. Core City cast off Biocorp's chain, but what followed was no peace. The alliance between Knight and Simmons fractured almost immediately. Praetorian Security and Coretech turned on each other, each hungering for dominance. What should have been liberation collapsed into full-blown civil war that tore Core City apart for years. The city's research district burned. Gangs took root in the chaos, and the once proud Biocorp hub became a battlefield of shifting allegiances and blood-soaked streets. Today, the Protectorate wears Biocorp's skin, claiming its symbols, speaking its ideology of unity through control. But it is not Biocorp. It is discipline without vision, iron without genius. The Underrail remained divided. Protectorate against pre-drones, core city ruled by oligarchs and mercantile powers. SCS cling to survival, while the faceless prowl with hidden intent. And in the shadow, Biocorp's legacy fester. Mutants wander the dark. Psi fields distort the unwary. Laboratories still hum in silence, their creations forgotten. Tchort endures, worshipped as God, reviled as mistake. Faceless moved in silence, perhaps servants of something deeper. And so Biocorp died, not in a single day, not in one grand collapse, but in a long unraveling through riots, rebellion, betrayal, and hubris. But its shadows lingered, a living scar left by humanity's arrogance. History is never dead. It echoes in the chants of the arena, in the march of the Protectorate soldiers, in the whispers of faceless psionics, and in the prayer to Tchort.